Back when Jump Force was initially announced, I made 2 separate videos on the game. The main focus of these videos was something like this. This game does not have enough gameplay depth. This is an issue, because if it had enough depth, it would be able to harbor its own esports or competitive community with tournaments and events, which would be good for everybody because it would foster a more active community that would encourage Spike Chunsoft and any other developer in this similar type of space to release more DLC content, which is again positive for everybody. Another point I brought up in that video is that these types of arena fighters won't be able to exist for much longer because games like Dragon Ball FighterZ taught us that you're able to have gameplay depth and a competitive environment and still supply us with awesome anime characters that we know and love. But back when I made those 2 videos in question, I wasn't even an anime YouTuber. I wasn't doing anything in this space. I was a fighting game YouTuber because I love fighting games. And because of that, I think when you watch those videos, I come off a lot more aggressive than I needed to. When you watch those videos, you might think that I hate anime games or I hate anime in general, which isn't the case because I watch a lot of anime and I grew up with Naruto even before I knew it was called anime, back when I thought it was just a cartoon. And I grew up on the Storm series, and that's still a series to this day that I love. Granted, I would much prefer Arc System Works to make a Naruto game at this point, but I would still buy a new Storm game, probably. But my love for these series doesn't stop me from recognizing that a competitive community would be much more positive for the game. More specifically, the longevity of said game. Some people perceive this part of the video as me saying I want Jump Force to be some type of 2D fighter, and that's not what I'm saying at all. For example, let's compare 2 arena fighters, Jump Force and One's Justice. Now, unfortunately, One's Justice didn't go far enough, so it's not going to get all of the positivity that comes along with being competitive, because again, it didn't quite go far enough, but it was pretty damn close. In Jump Force, you have a mechanic where while you're in the middle of being comboed, you can just keep mashing square and you'll fall out of the combo as long as the timing is right with your opponent's hit, which is basically like a combo breaker mechanic from a regular fighting game, but there's no punishment for just mashing the button. In other fighting games, you're no longer allowed to break out of the combo if you fail it the first time. This is a type of depth, I suppose, but it's executed really poorly in Jump Force, where in One's Justice, on the other hand, you're not even allowed to block in the air. You can, however, use a just break, which is kind of a similar thing to what we're talking about in Jump Force. As soon as you're hit, if you press block at the same time, you'll block just that initial attack and you'll have a little bit of an advantage with the next hit. So you'll almost definitely be able to hit your opponent after they hit into your just break. Now, you can't continue to block and you can't do it in the middle of a combo, but you can prevent your opponent trying to do an air combo on you. This is a much better way of handling depth because it requires the player to react within a certain time frame, as opposed to just mashing a button. In Jump Force, if your opponent is blocking, you're forced to either guard break them through multiple hits, or alternatively, grab them, which, by the way, the grabs in Jump Force, they suck. They're not good. They don't go very far. Even if you dash up to your opponent with a universal dash mechanic, you won't be in range to grab them, which is ridiculous. In One's Justice, each character has at least one type of red attack. Red attacks are unique attacks that break through the opponent's guard and usually string into a combo, so you can usually just punish an opponent for blocking and get a full combo off of it. Red attacks are typically much slower than regular attacks. To account for red versus normal attacks versus blocking, they also have an additional mechanic called yellow attacks, which are a type of armor attack. You can't be broken out of your armor attack unless the opponent uses a red attack. This paper, scissors, rock scenario is the 3D fighting game equivalent of the overhead, high, mid, low system that 2D fighting games use. Because of that system, you're able to constantly keep your opponent guessing. With each decision you make, your opponent has another subsequential decision that they have to make. This is the type of depth I'm talking about when I say Jump Force doesn't have enough depth to supply a competitive community. What I mean is that when you play Jump Force, there is a little amount of decisions you're making during each match and an even tinier amount of decisions you're making that actually change the result of the match. I'm not trying to say that One's Justice is a competitive game that's balanced for esports, because it's not. In fact, there's a character or even multiple characters that stand out above the rest pretty clearly, making for very unbalanced competitive gameplay. But the universal mechanics give those competitive players like myself and friends of mine and a large community something to play with, something to work with, something to think about, something to improve upon, something to learn from. And unfortunately, there aren't enough of those mechanics in Jump Force, so I think a lot of people who are more competitively driven are probably going to walk away from this game pretty quickly. That being said, there's still going to be plenty of anime fans like myself continuing to play Jump Force, but in the future, it will be more advantageous for these developers to create these games in mind of the competitive player so that they don't lose those players for no reason. Because I think when you make the game slightly more competitive, like they did with Once Justice, you probably don't lose that casual audience while you do that. So in conclusion, was I wrong about Jump Force? In short, not really. There is not enough depth to support a competitive community, and there should be. There's no reason for there not to be. When I said that the games were going to crash and burn, I didn't mean that Jump Force wasn't going to sell well. I mean that in the future, when more sales come to games that are more competitive, like Once Justice, and heck, I'm going to put Once Justice and Dragon Ball FighterZ in the same sentence, because Once Justice really gave it a good try, and granted, it's not on that level of FighterZ, but it gave a good damn effort. It's the first game with a mix-up system that I've seen in a 3D arena fighter, and it did a fantastic job. So I'll give it its credits where due. Games like these, not specifically Once Justice, not specifically Dragon Ball FighterZ, but other anime fighting games in the future with more of a focus on competitive design will take away sales from the more traditional 3D arena fighters that we're used to seeing from anime games. And in the long run, that means they'll stop making the more traditional 3D arena fighters because it will become less profitable. While I was editing this video, I noticed a slight mistake in the wording of that previous statement. I said it would take away sales from other anime games. That's not what I mean. Most anime games aren't competing with each other because they're made by the same publisher, so they're spread out. Of course, Bandai Namco is not going to release two different anime arena fighters in the same month or anything like that. What I mean is there are players who will not purchase the more traditional 3D arena fighter who would be more willing to purchase an arena fighter like Once Justice or even an anime fighter like Dragon Ball FighterZ. Because at the end of the day, people who are going to buy these 3D arena fighters, they're going to buy the 3D arena fighter regardless of whether it's competitive or not. So why not gear these games in a more competitive direction like Once Justice has tried to do, and might I say, succeeded to do. The type of depth that exists in Jump Force isn't the type of depth that increases the player's decisions. And if it's not increasing the amount of decisions the player has to make, or even the quality of decisions that the player has to make, then what's the point of that depth in the first place? This is not to say that I'm not excited about Jump Force, because A, they announced Yugi Muto for that game, B, they announced Killua for that game, and C, My Hero Academia is probably going to be in that game. So I'm really excited about it. But it is to say that I want these games to change. I don't want them to be the same. And granted, Jump Force does have a lot of cool gameplay mechanics that aren't present in a lot of arena fighters, but those gameplay mechanics aren't necessarily a positive thing. I tell you what though, I was wrong about one thing. In one of those videos, I said that there's no reason to buy this game other than the roster. There is another reason to buy the game, called Create a Character.